So, as a reminder, right, we know, I hope that, attendance is optional. I want to see you. I'm very happy to see you. But I also don't want you to feel pressured, like, oh no, I can't make it, or I haven't been here, or, like as if that's a problem, right? There's no pressure. If you like to attend class but can't, don't forget that each of our class meetings is recorded, and then I post the class meeting on the date, or sorry, I post the recording of the class meeting under the resource, or on the resources page in the module under the relevant week. So even if, for example, like on Tuesday, we're a little bit behind schedule, and so we're talking about material that is initially presented last week, I still put the video from Tuesday under this week's module resources on the page under the this week's resources module. And then I number the days. So today is, I think, our sixth meeting. So I number the days. Even when, like, last Thursday, I had to miss a meeting. I just took a video that I was going to post for you anyway, and I labeled that, like, day 4 or whatever it was supposed to be, right? So if you can't make a meeting, don't worry. Class is recorded. The recordings are posted on the link to the recording is posted on our Canvas page. Where we are, sorry, let me get the right schedule. So what I want to do, unless you have outstanding questions from our meeting on Tuesday, what I want to do is just launch right back into the material that begins with chapter 4 and ends with chapter 8. That material is that material covers the world of Boolean connectives. So it's really important to our course core, as well as the future of the work we do together. The work we do together tends to scaffold. So while it's not, impossible by any stretch later on in the semester, if you've been struggling early on, to still get it, right? It's not like you can't move forward unless you master the current material. Sometimes retroactively stuff makes more sense, right? But insofar as we rely on, in our current work, previous concepts and skills, that's what I mean by scaffolding. All right, so let me jump into the room. Share my whiteboard. Whoa, whiteboard, and I'm echo. Okay, I muted myself. All right, so as usual, everybody, let me open up the chat window. If you have a question, problem, confusion, comment, please don't be shy about just like if I'm speaking, just say, hey, Mia, right? Quiet. And then, or if you don't want to do that, feel free to send a message via chat. You're welcome, if you want, to raise your hand in terms of the icon or your actual hand. But because I'm moving from one screen to another, I might miss it. So please don't stand on ceremony. Interrupt away if I'm saying something that's confusing, erroneous, whatever, right? Or you want to make a comment. Okay, so we're continuing. So chapters, what was that? 4 to 8 continued. Okay, what do we already know? We already know that we're dealing with simple sentences and compound sentences. Compound sentences are built out of at least one simple sentence and at least one connective. What is a simple sentence? A simple sentence is a sentence without a connective, or a simple sentence is a sentence that is the smallest linguistic entity that has a truth value. A compound sentence, like we said, involves at least one simple sentence and at least one connective. So then now the question is, what's a connective? Well, we begin with the so-called Boolean connectives: negation, conjunction, disjunction. So our whole logical world right now, if you will, consists of simple statements which we symbolize with a capital letter A through Z. We typically use the first letter of the subject in a simple sentence. If the subject, so let's say we had, I think on Tuesday we had the sentence, Arshak speaks, and then we had another sentence, Arshak is using VPN, right? Two simple sentences involving Arshak. We can't symbolize both simple sentences with the letter A, because then once we're in the domain of the symbolized sentences, that is logically notated sentences, we won't know which A we're talking about. Are we talking about A as in Arshak speaks, or A as in Arshak is using VPN? So, each symbolization that we use for a simple sentence, so each capital letter, this is the case in an argument, not outside of an argument, but each capital letter has to stand for a distinct sentence. And then we saw also that our connectives, negation, conjunction, disjunction, are symbolized by, respectively, right, our squiggle mark, the tilde for negation, the ampersand for conjunction, and the wedge for disjunction. And just as a quick for what it's worth, if you tool around in other logic texts, you might see the following symbols that also go with negation. So sometimes you'll see hook that goes with negation. Sometimes you might see a pipe, a vertical slash, or vertical line. That's a little less common. You might see a caret, caret. You might see a dot, right? But so think about it this way, particularly if you are, I think, lucky enough to be multilingual. So if a lot of our student body at Pierce has this wonderful linguistic wealth, because a lot of our Pierce students speak more than one language. Sadly, I struggle with other languages than my own. So I'm not very good at them unless I'm really immersed, and I just don't get to do that very often. But what I found when I finally started to become more conversant with other languages, I thought, oh my gosh, my world opens up. So if you are multilingual, then you know what I'm talking about. It's something to be celebrated. You've got like these great, vast territories, conceptual territories that you can roam over because you're moving from one language to another. Well, now you get to add symbolic logic as another language. So the language we're learning right now is we're kind of learning a dialect, if you will. We've got some symbolization that will see us through to the end of the semester. We're going to add some symbolization. We're going to adjust symbolization, right? So we might have different accents, if you will. But we're learning yet another language. So if you see other notation for negation, conjunction, disjunction, and when we get there, the conditional, the biconditional, and then later with the quantifier logic that we'll be learning, don't worry, because all you have to do is say, oh, what does this symbolization stand for in the language I already know? Oh, I see, I can incorporate it, okay? Last thing we did was we looked at what are known as the truth definitions for each of our connectives. So we said, okay, we want to know the conditions under which a negation is true, right? What are the conditions under which negation is always true, or how is negation defined as true? What are the conditions under which negation is false, right? So how it's defined as false, and the same for conjunction and disjunction. We want to know this stuff because, as I mentioned on Tuesday, we want to know when we're engaging in an argument, we want to know that we're aiming at truth, right? So, since the sentences that we're using in an argument are often constructed or can be constructed in Boolean logic, we want to know the conditions under which our sentences are true and false, right? So just as a quick reminder, so I'm going to use the same lettering as before, where this time, or actually, let me change it out just so that I can hammer home the following point. Any sentence in the universe P is either true or false. And the negation is defined according to not only that initial set of values, but also its function, right? So not operates on the truth value. So not true, false, not false, true. Okay, so think about your connectives in terms of their symbolization, right, as operators. They're operating on. The negation operates on whatever sentence it immediately precedes, right? So it's going to be we're thinking about reading left to right. The sentence that, the negation, the tilde appears immediately to the left of whatever sentence it negates, okay? There are only, we talked about this as well, only two possible values for any sentence. It's either true or false. We talked about bivalence, right? Since we're talking about a single sentence negated, there are two possible truth definitions for the negation. Notice that, and now I'll introduce another stand-in, Q. Notice that for the conjunction and the disjunction, the conjunction is a bringing with, the disjunction is a disjoining, right? So that means you've got multiple elements. You've got the left side, the right side of each. So you've got two elements. And we said, and this is our standard, that the first sentence in the order is always going to be half true, half false. And then the second one takes half of that. We'll talk more about constructing truth tables in a little bit, but right now we're just recapping our truth definitions. Notice also that these four rows exhaust the possible combinations of truth values. And then we say, okay, given that conjunction is the values of conjunction, right, are determined by P, Q respectively, but also the meaning of the ampersand, which is with, con, both, right? That means that P and Q together tell us what the conjunction is. And most of us are pretty comfortable with the values. We know that a conjunction is true when and only when each of the conjuncts is true. Sorry, I just want to turn off my notifications. Okay. Remember, at any point, if this doesn't ring bells, or you have a follow-up question, send up the alert. I should make these T's and F's a little bit bigger. And then P or Q. Sometimes it feels a little confusing to people at first because we think of the or as exclusive. But remember, logic just knows that the or says at least one, right? At least one or the other is the case. That's one way to read the sentence, one colloquial way to read the sentence. So here we have effectively the reverse set of values where there's only one instance that a disjunction is false, and that's when each of the disjuncts is false. On the other hand, the conjunction is true when and only when each of the conjuncts is true. And then, as we saw, the negation takes the value opposite the sentence it negates. So then the next thing we did was we came up with some sentences, and I said, okay, well, here are the conditions. This sentence element is true. The sentence element is false. What's the value of the whole? Or I said, here's the value of the whole. Work back to the basest elements in terms of truth values, right? We also, we worked a bit on translating from ordinary English into symbolic logic notation. We'll certainly revisit that, but I want to make sure that we hammer out thinking about the ways that we can use truth tables to assess sentences. Okay, so I'll just use a general title here, right? So using truth tables to assess sentences. We'll also use truth tables to assess arguments, namely to assess validity. So the big concepts here are going to be the following. Contingent, tautologies, and forgive me, I'm just blanking on the specific phrasing that our text uses, but I'll just go ahead and say logically false. Is it logically false, or does he say tautologically false, which is feels a little awkward? Was that Kevin, or sorry, Kenneth? Which I think it's logically false, right? Oh, I see. Jasmine, thanks. And Kenneth, sorry, for some reason we're getting some your audio's garbled. At least it is on my end. I don't know if it is on everybody else's. Yeah. So taut falsity. I'll go ahead and do that. Thanks, Jasmine. And let me just make this prettier. So as you can probably imagine, the vast majority of sentences in our daily life are contingent. They're contingently true, they're contingently false. In other words, their truth or falsity is dependent upon or contingent upon, facts on the ground, right? So how do we talk about this in terms of a truth table? Well, we say a sentence that is true on at least one row of the truth table. And here I go with my horrible board work. Don't forget to, if you can't make out my writing, if it's illegible, just yell at me and I'll try to make it more, I'll either decode it for you or I'll try to make it more legible. Okay, so on at least one row of the truth table. Okay. A tautology, and by the way, just file what I'm about to say in the background, because it'll come up again. You already know that. Whether or not you're real confident with the concept is another thing, but you already know that a sentence can be logically true in a number of different ways, even if we haven't covered those yet. One of the things that I think is really interesting about studying the logical structure of sentences is that we begin to think about how the machinery of logic works, such that, let's say a sentence that is a tautology is not, rephrase, such that a certain sort of sentence that's logically true is not necessarily also a tautology. And that gives us some ways of thinking about what we mean when we talk about a sentence that is necessarily true. So we get like these fine grain or finer grained distinctions between between meanings of necessary truths. Okay, so a tautology is a whoopsie. No, I don't want to talk. No, stop it. Sorry, my computer's acting up. A tautology is a sentence that is true on every row of the truth table. So, we'll work some examples, but think about your truth table this way. Your truth table is a finite world, right? It is a set of conditions under which a sentence that is governed by or dominated by or driven by a connective, right, is true or false, right? So it's a world that has a certain number of ways this sentence could shake out. So if you have a sentence that's true on every single row, and you can have, let's say, a 64-row truth table, right? What you're saying is there's no possible world in which this sentence comes out false, right? And that can be quite powerful, in argumentation, right? Now, as I mentioned before, sentences that are always true or always false don't all work in a truth table, and that's because the truth table's purpose is to grind out truth values, right? Truth. So in Boolean logic, in a logic where you're using a truth table, the truth table's job, right, is to grind out possible truth values. How? Well, truth in a truth table is a function of a sentence's constituent elements and the meanings of and definitions of its operators, right? So if you have a multi-operator sentence, one of those operators is the governing or main connective. And, that's the one that is determined by all the constituent elements, sub-operators, and ultimately atomic or simple sentences. Okay. And then the taut falsity. And I'm sorry, Kevin, I keep calling you Kevin. I don't know why. Kenneth. I know you're Kenneth. Kenneth, did you want to try saying what you were trying to say earlier when your audio kind of crapped out on me? Don't you love how I'm making it sound like you did something wrong, but you didn't? Oh, okay. Yeah. And taut false. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Kenneth. So a sentence that's always false on a truth table, right, is, so a tautological falsity, or a tautologically false sentence, or a truth table false sentence is a sentence that is false on every row of the truth table. So so think about it this way. Oh, sorry, Victoria, what are you thinking?
So actually, I wanted to ask you about contingent sentences, because as I understand, contingent sentence is a sentence that is true on at least one row and a false at least one row. So it's not just true on at least one row of the truth table.
Right. Well, so how about this? I was wondering if this was going to come up. So good for you. When we define a contingent sentence, where, so I think our kind of ordinary ways of thinking about contingency involve play out sort of this way. We're talking about a contingently true sentence. And the reason why I just gave that definition under a contingent sentence is because a sentence that is contingent could be also a tautology if it's not just one row, it's every row. A contingently false sentence is one that is false on at least one row, right? So we can say, so if we want to say contingently true or contingently false, right, we're going to then, yes, add true on at least one row, false on at least one row. But we, like I said, we would say, we could assess in the way that I mentioned. Okay, thank you. Does that help a little bit? Does that make sense?
Yes, it helps, but I just want to ask you, could a tautology be contingent?
Great. Okay, so on the interpretation of contingency as including contingents, or sorry, rephrase. On the interpretation of contingency including both contingently true, contingently false, of course we'd say no, right? But if we have a tautology, then we do in fact have a sentence that's true on at least one row, right? If we have a falsity, we have a sentence that's true on, or sorry, that's false on at least one row. But if what I've done has confused you, just go ahead and keep the original articulation that you gave, right? Because that covers you. And it also narrows the scope of contingency to where a contingent sentence wouldn't also be able to be a tautology, wouldn't also be able to be a taut falsity, precisely because it has at least not just the one truth, but also the one false row, or the row on which the sentence is true, the row on which the sentence is false, and vice versa.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Great question. Okay, so, oops, I just did something that I didn't mean to do. Okay. All right, so one of the things that we will definitely want to do is look at some examples, but first, and practice a bit together. But first, let me go ahead and remind us of another really important assessment concept, and that involves validity. So, oops, sorry. Okay, so we also use truth tables to assess validity. Okay, so I'm really hopeful that the stuff that we're doing now ends up feeling really comfortable to you. If not right now, then it may be retroactively. And what I mean by that is this. When we understand the truth definitions for each of our connectives, or our operators, and we understand how to assess an individual sentence. Oh, I forgot about equivalences. Sorry. Well, let me do that first. equivalent sentences and then valid arguments, we're going to see the foundation for the rules that we use to prove the conclusion of a valid argument in this system, or to prove a tautology in this system, right? We can also prove logically false sentences as well. Okay, so there's a nice building from one to the other. That, I mean, I really think it's worthwhile. That said, not everybody likes kind of making that connection. In other words, they're comfortable working derivations without, understanding their source, if you will, in the truth table. Okay, so we use truth tables to assess tautological equivalences. So it's typically two, but two or more sentences are tautologically equivalent if they have identical truth values in the respective column under the main operator. Another way you can define equivalent sentences is to say these are truth table equivalent sentences, or these are truth functionally equivalent sentences. And the one of the powers of equivalences is, I think, two of the powers of equivalences. One is specific to the course. One is, I think, a benefit just to our to sort of the stretchiness of our thinking. Namely, when we recognize equivalences by way of the truth table, we'll see, oh, I could, in a derivation, since these say the same thing truth functionally, substitute one for the other, right? So when two sentences are logically equivalent, you could substitute one for the other. Think about it this way. If I say that Victoria is to the left of Jasmine, right? That is now not truth functionally equivalent to, but the wording, right, can be expressed in alternative verbiage. So if Victoria is to the left of Jasmine, it follows that, or we can say the same thing when we say Jasmine is to the right of Victoria, right? So something like what we're doing here with the truth table, okay? And I'm gonna, we'll look at again, some examples, but let me just make the final use of the truth table for assessments this way. We also use the truth table, truth table to assess, I'm going to call this first tautological consequence. Tautological consequence, also known as validity or entailment. So we know that an argument is valid when there is no row on which the premise or premises, so I'll just abbreviate here as PRR, are true and the conclusion is false. Right? So what the truth table does for us is it displays, it exhibits the status of an argument as valid or invalid. It does so properly when we're talking about truth functional sentences, right? There are some sentences that when you put into a truth table come out with wonky values that you say, well, no, this can't be right. But then we shouldn't have put the sentence in the truth table to begin with, right? So I'll say more about that in a little bit. Don't let me forget that. It's, the truth table is the right tool for assessing sentences that are truth functional, right? That are driven by, for right now, the Boolean connectives. If you try to put another type of sentence into a truth table, it's like, trying to measure someone's blood pressure by putting a thermometer on their arm, right? It's just not the right tool. Okay, so do these definitions make sense? How are we doing overall? What I'm hoping is that you say to me, yep, I'm fine on the definitions. I'm fine on the basic concepts. They make sense to me. That's what we want. But I understand if that's not where we are yet. How are we doing? All right, well, let's practice a bit. See how things are going. All right, so let's practice. First, I'm going to just throw a single sentence on the whiteboard, and then we are going to determine its main operator. We are going to determine the possible truth values for the reference columns and then plug those in. And then we'll determine the possible values for the sub operators, working our way up to the main operator. Okay? All right, so how about this? Okay, so we have the following: negation, open paren, P, conjunction Q, close paren, disjunction, open paren, negation P, conjunction Q, close paren. Now, just as a reminder, our textbook never puts spaces in between a sentence's elements. I do it just because I'm just used to doing it. Like, it's just hard for me to write differently, but also because my writing tends to be messy and then the T's and F's will be hard to read. So, all right. So first question, say it or type it in the chat. What is the main operator? Is it the first negation, the first conjunction, the disjunction, the second negation, or the second conjunction? Great. So we've got 3 people saying it's the disjunction. Really good. Yep. Do we want to talk about why it's the main animal? What is it doing? You could talk about it in terms of scope, or you could talk about it in terms of what makes the subconnective sub and not main. What do you think? Right. So the disjunction shows what kind of sentence we've got. It has the largest scope. Good, good. So the disjunction is telling us that on its left side is a compound statement, on its right side is a compound statement. We could say also it is, as such, the only connective that covers all the elements, right? It's saying the whole left side and the whole right side. The other way to think about it is in terms of the fact that you'll never have the main connective show up in a parenthetical, right? The reason why compound sentence elements are in a pair of parentheses to begin with is to set that compound sentence off as a unit, right? That goes together separate and apart from whatever else might be going on. Now, you might say, but Mia, the negation, the first negation on the far left is not, bound by the parentheses. Why can't that then be the main connective? And the answer to that goes back to the point that Jasmine made about scope, namely, the first negation covers only the items in the parenthetical. More specifically, the negation says it's not the case that both P and Q. The second negation covers just P. Both the negation and Q give us the conjunction. Okay. So what we want to do then is determine the disjunction's values, possible values last. Right? So this will be our main column. Now, the one way that you can present your possible values for your simple or atomic sentences is in the reference columns that I showed you on the previous whiteboard. But another way you can work it is as follows. You can put the values right under the simple or atomic sentences. So true, true, false, false, true, false, true, false. And then the P is the same sentence from one iteration to the next. So the same values go underneath P, and the same values from the first iteration of Q go under the second iteration of Q. Now, if anybody's wondering why we put these values in these orders, and see already my rows are kind of wonky. The uninteresting answer is it's the convention, right? That's how what is adopted. That's sort of the across versions of the system. This is how they lay out. So we'll see as we go forward. The more atomic or simple sentences you have, the greater number of rows you have in the truth table. They increase exponentially. So we'll look at the formula for that. And then the leftmost sentence always gets half true, half false. And then the second one or the next one in the series gets half of that. So notice how we get half true, half false, and then half of P's initial values get split up, and we get alternating true, false, true, false. Indeed, however many sentences you have however many sentences you have, the very last one in the order is going to alternate true, false, true, false, true, false, true, false, and so on all the way down. Okay, how are we doing? So far, so good? Again, what I want for you is, yep, makes perfectly good sense, got it, no problem. But I also want for you the feeling of comfort that if you're confused or you have a question or a comment, right, like Victoria's great comment about contingent sentences earlier, feel free to raise them. What do you think in Arshak?
I have a question about the negation. So does the first one apply to the and, the conjunction symbol, or does it apply to P and Q?
Great question. So you said the same thing in two different ways. Notice that the language kind of forced you to do it. First, let me read the sentence. It's not the case that P and Q, right? So the parentheses say that this conjunction sentence is sorry, rephrase. The elements in this conjunction sentence are a single unit. So the negation says no to the whole thing. What's the whole thing? A conjunction. Right? I think what you're asking is in that second iteration, do we read it this way? And we'll actually, I'm going to leave this here because we're going to go ahead and construct a truth table to see if this sentence is equivalent or not to this sentence. Right? But the short answer is when you've got the parentheses with a negation out front, the negation covers the whole, which is to say covers in this case, the conjunction. If we took the paren away, now we'd have the negation covering, oh, sorry, I meant to circle that. Covering just the P as it does on the second, in the second iteration of P. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Of course. Okay, so let me try to make these pretty or less difficult to read. Okay, so when you've got a disjunction or a conjunction as your main connective, it doesn't matter which side you work first, right? So we could work the right side first and then move over to the left side, but we work the values for the disjunction last. What does matter though, so let's work the right side first. Of the two, the negation and the conjunction, which is the main connective or main operator, and so the operator whose values we determine last or second. That makes sense? Is it one or two? Which one are we going to determine first? Or which, I said which is the main one. Which are we going to determine last? Right. So Arshak, we're determining the negation first because the conjunction, the sentence says it's not P and it's Q, or it's both not P and Q. So, and the negation covers just P. So here we go. Let's remember the value, or sorry, the definitions, right? The negation is defined as the rejection of whatever value it's negating. So not true is what's going to be under the negation.
Opposite.
Right. Okay. So not true is
False.
good. Thank you. Not true is
False.
not false is
True.
not false is
True.
good. Now, and I'm not just trying, I'm not only trying to be obnoxious by having us say these together. As you know, when you keep repeating them, I mean, there's something about that process that kind of gets it into our heads. It's kind of like when you handwrite stuff, you tend to remember it more. Okay, now we're done with P's values, so we're gonna go ahead and scribble those values out. Now we're going to determine the values of conjunction. What do we know about a conjunction? A conjunction is true when and only when, or if and only if, each of the conjuncts is
True.
beautiful. Thank you, Victoria. So we've got false, false, true, false. Is everybody okay with that? Scribble these guys out. All right. We know from the previous discussion that the negation on the far left is the main operator. So we're going to calculate the conjunction first, or determine the conjunction first, and then move over to the negation. So we're using our same definition, right? A conjunction is true when, if and only if each of the conjuncts is true, as Victoria put it and was exactly right about. So we have true, false, false, false. Done with these guys. Scribble those guys out. And then we are going to move on. Not true is false. Not false is
True.
true. Not false is. And not false is. Good. Thank you, Victoria. I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody, but I'm especially appreciating Victoria right now. All right. Scribble those guys. What are you thinking, Priscilla?
Yeah, hi. Quick question. So I'm just a little confused when you say like not false. Can we read the sentence like complete? Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, okay. I'm trying to think of how best to do this. Okay, so you're comfortable, Priscilla, with the idea that the negation is saying it's not the case that whatever the conjunction's values are. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So
Okay, now that we know, I kind of can say it in my head. So the first one would be like, it's not true that Pia and Quinn are innocent.
yeah, okay. Yeah. Thank you. I was kind of going in that direction, but I was trying to formulate the following. I was trying to formulate how to say it's not the case that it's true that Pia, right? Because we've got to account for the fact that this value is true, this value is false, right? We've got to be able to incorporate that into the ordinary English.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, but great question. Yeah. And so notice, everybody, what I take Priscilla to be doing here. Priscilla's saying, okay, I need to make this my own, right? I need to be able to articulate this and have it make sense. Otherwise, I'm having trouble kind of seeing why the value is what it is, right? And that happens to that's our experience a lot of the time. I think I mentioned the other day that we either fall into or toggle between one of two camps, where we say something like, okay, just tell me what to do. Like, I do this with my partner all the time. He wants to, like, so he's all sorts of technology geek, right? And he'll be, I'll say, make my computer work. And he'll say, well, and he starts giving, let's say, some pretty technical explanation, and I'll say, just tell me what to do. I don't want to understand. I just want to do it. Right? And then there are other times when he'll tell me what to do, and I'll say, I can't do this unless I understand what I'm doing. Explain it to me. And I can't, I think I know my mind pretty well, but I can't always, I think there are psychological reasons. Like, I don't have a tolerance level for thinking about stuff at a certain moment. I'm too tired or whatever, right? But so I toggle back and forth between those. Most of us in logic, when we're first coming to logic, don't toggle so much. It's more that we say, okay, explain this to me so that I can, or I need to explain it to myself so I understand it. Then I can do it. And then some of us say, just tell me what to do. Just give me the freaking rules and I'll do it and I'll understand it later. And I don't think there's a right way to go. I mean, I do want our goal ultimately to be to really be able to think through some interesting things about these logical systems, right? But how you get there that's not up to me to decide. So let me know, like, thank you, Priscilla, for saying, hey, that isn't really working for me. Can we try something else? And we'll figure it out together. All right, last one. Disjunction. A disjunction is false if and only if each of the disjuncts is?
Both are false.
Yes, both are false. Wonderful. So notice, and forgive me for putting this first conjunction in blue, I meant to keep it in black, but notice that now what we're doing is determining the values of the disjunction by way of the blue values, because that's the current set of values that are driving the constituents, right? So as Kenneth says, the disjunction is false when and only when each of the disjuncts is false, or when both are false. So we get false, true, true, true. And as Victoria nicely pointed out, if we don't assume we're talking about a contingently true sentence, right? This sentence is contingent because it's false at least once and it's true at least once. Okay, really good. Okay. Since Arshak had brought up this great question earlier, I went ahead and put the two sentences in a truth table. Let's go ahead and see if these say the same thing, and then that'll give us a chance to talk a little bit about the De Morgan's equivalences. It'll also allow us to talk about kind of what we're doing when we're putting a sentence in negation normal form, or I just say pushing negation around, right? So I hope you're comfortable with the idea that the conjunction is the main operator on the left sentence, while the negation is the main operator on the right. And if you want, just for the sake of the comparison, you can just go ahead and take these values and plug them in here, right? Because it's the same sentence. And we get false, true, true, true. We want to know what the negation P and negation Q values are. We know that P is true, true, false, false. That's just how it lays out when you have a 4-row truth table. The first sentence's values are true, true, false, false. So we get false, false, true, true, and then alternating false, true, false, true. And then we know that conjunction has this very strict demand, strict requirement, false, 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 true. And we can see then that these sentences are, let me do it this way, that these sentences are not tautologically equivalent. Now, I say we can see that. Do we want to talk about it? So just because you have the same values on rows 1 and 4, notice that on rows 2 and 3, the values are contradictory. So we do not have sentences that have the same truth value on every row of the on every row in the column under the main connective of each sentence. How are we doing? What do we think?
I have a question about the conjunction that ended up being contingent.
Yeah.
How come the final answer in the middle is false, true, true, true? Shouldn't it be false, false, true, false?
Okay, so I think what you're doing based on what you said is you are conflating the disjunction with the conjunction. So you said in the conjunction sentence that was contingent, shouldn't it be? Is it, or have I misunderstood you?
Oh, no, I meant to say disjunction. I'm sorry.
Okay, so the disjunction, so is it fair to say that the disjunction is comparing the values under the negation with the values under the conjunction? So we've got false, disjunction false is false. True, doesn't matter what the other disjunct is, as long as the disjunction, as long as one of the disjuncts is true, the disjunction is true. As long as one of the disjuncts is true, disjunction is true. As long as one of the disjuncts is true, disjunction is true. Oh, God, sorry. I saw your I wasn't looking at your message. Thank you, Ashak. Okay. I'm like staring at your tile and you've already written the note. Okay, so one of the things, I don't know how many people like, playing, like, let's say video games, but if you find yourself, kind of struggling for whatever reason, like I remember how much of a struggle it was for me, although probably not for the same reasons it is for you. I was just a crappy student. But, if, one of the ways that you might find things clicking for you is if you say, okay, we're learning a game right now. Here are our game pieces, capital letters, A through Z, right? 3 operators, right? That each has a specific function, right? Here are the rules of the game. Now I'm going to go play it, right? I know what the parenthetical means, blah, 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 right? You could think about this as like a game. And, I know that a number of you are in computer science, studying, you're doing programming or coding, and that this stuff is part of that process. In fact, it is how I think a huge component of how these games are in fact built. So it's a game within a game. I don't know. I got nothing. That's the best I can. That's all I can give you. That's the best I can do. Okay. Let's. I want to make sure we get a number of examples in. So I'm only for right now kind of doing one from the assessment of individual sentences. So we did a contingent sentence, and then we've got a question about equivalence. Now what I want to do is work another equivalence, but another equivalence question, right, or a set of sentences, and determine if they're equivalent. But I want to get several things out of it. Okay, so let's take. We worked this one just a moment ago. Right, so as a reminder, and I'm just going to go ahead and put the same, I'm just going to put the atomic values in under each atomic sentence. We just worked the sentence on the left a little bit ago, but let's or just a moment ago, but let's work it again. So we know the conjunction is the main connective. Let's go ahead and work the negations first. So it's not the case that true. It's not the case that true. It's not the case that false. The opposite of false, right? Opposite of true, opposite of false, opposite of true, opposite of false. And then false, 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 true. Highlight my sentence's main operator. And then the other side, true, 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 false. False, 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 true. Let me pause here for a moment to ask if trotting through that did not feel like a gallop, or going through that felt like a nice leisurely stroll versus a trot versus a gallop. How do we feel? Thinking everybody's doing okay? Good, good, good. Okay, good. So here's the question. When we look at our green columns and then we read the green rows, do we see that these sentences have identical truth values on every row of the truth table in the column under the main operator? These are equivalent. Oh, hold on. Jasmine. Okay. I was gonna say, wait, we got to talk about this. All right, no, you're okay. Good. Okay. So these are equivalent. This is, by the way, just as we're going to talk more about them, but this is one version of De Morgan's equivalences. And they're just named after Augustus De Morgan, the guy who came up with them. And notice what happens in the case of having a negation on either side of a conjunction. When you move to the right sentence, what you've done is you've pushed your negation out to the front and generated, in so doing, a disjunction. So let's look at what these sentences are saying in ordinary English. Both are not, which is not as colloquial, I don't think. I don't think it's the common way that we have of expressing that, but there it is. And then this says neither. It also says not either. You could say neither nor, or not either one or the other. Notice what we're doing is when we say neither, we're exhausting the possibility of it being P, of it being Q, which means both are not, right? Both P and Q, since conjunction is the main operator, are not. So, here's what I recommend you do whenever you're not sure about, the just thinking in structural terms, put the sentence in terms of something that you're used to, right? So like, I think Kenneth, we had something, who was it? It was, oh my gosh, I'm blank. Was it Zira? Who's the character on your tile again? And then you also talked about there's a villain. That was a number of days ago. Cinder. Yeah. Okay, so we would say, oops. Ah. Neither Cinder, and who's the bad guy? I thought it started with a Z. Okay, Dio instead. Okay, neither Cinder nor Dio. Okay, help me finish this. Neither Cinder nor Dio what? Is a human being. I mean, they're anime characters. I don't know. Is a Disney character? Are heroes. Okay. Okay. So that means that it's not the case that Cinder is a hero, and it's not the case that Dio is a hero. What about like sports? Do people like I don't know, soccer, football, basketball, chess? What do you like? Or music? Who's your favorite musical artist? Somebody. Anybody. Don't make me say it, because you know what? I will say it's Barry Manilow. Okay. Yay. All right. Carolyn, Beyonce. All right. Uh, okay. So, um, not both Beyonce and, okay, you know what? I'm doing it. Barry Manilow are, let's see. What can we say about Beyonce? Tell me something about Beyonce. I know she's a really famous artist, but so is Barry Manilow. How about this? I got one. Ha! I got one. Not both Beyonce and Barry Manilow perform at I'm gonna. I want to hold on to what you both have said, but because I've got one in mind for a reason. Um, Perform at, I don't know how to spell it, Coachella. So we have. It's not the case that, let's do B for Beyonce and A for Barry Manilow perform at Coachella. And we're going to get another De Morgan's. So not both tells us that either one does not or the other does not. One is not or the other is not. We already know that the conjunction, right, is true on the first, when you have four rows, the atomics, and there's There's no operator around that covers just B. There's no operator that covers just A prior to the conjunction. So we know that the conjunction is true on row 1 and then false on the remaining rows. And then the negation values are opposite. We know that the negation values are opposite. We also know that the disjunction is false in one case only. And hello, look at equivalence. Again, so these are equivalent. This is another De Morgan's equivalence. And notice what we do when your negation is in front of, as in the case of the previous whiteboard, in front of a disjunction, you push the negation through so that it's on each side or on either side of what is now a conjunction. When your negation is in front of a disjunction, you push the negation through so that now the negation is on each side of a disjunction. Now, the other point that I want to make is this, and it has to do with the concept of validity. When you're looking at just when you're looking at the values in the column under the main operator for each sentence, is there any row on which one sentence, let me rephrase that. Is there any row on which the first sentence is true and the second sentence is false? No. On every row where sentence 1 is true, so also is sentence 2. So not only are these equivalent, but because they say the same thing, right? Remember, we can use them as substitutions. They say the same thing, so there will never be a row on which the premise or the first sentence is true and the second is false. So they're equivalent, and they are, and the inference from one to the other is valid. Okay. So with that in mind, let me throw 2 more arguments up, and then we can keep working on them and more on Tuesday. So here's sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3. And let's think about it this way. Here's premise 1, here's premise 2, and then let's make sentence 3 be the conclusion. So what do we know about sentence 1? It is a disjunction. There are no subconnectives to whose values we need to determine. It is a disjunction that brings together 2 simple or atomic sentences. So we lay out the ordinary definitions. I say ordinary because, you know, there was no sub operator whose values we needed to determine. Same with the second premise. And then what do we do with Q? Well, Q doesn't have any operator working on it. So we simply take the atomic or simple statement possible values, true, false, and we plug them in. Right? And this is, of course, we're assuming that we're comfortable with our reference columns, right? What P and Q are. These are the values we use, we refer to make sense of each of our operators. So What do we know about a valid argument? A valid argument is one in which it's impossible for the conclusion to be false if the premises are true. Well, let's look at the rows where we've got a false conclusion. Is there a row, or sorry, are the premises both true when the conclusion is false? No. Take a look at row 4. No. Take a look at row 2. So this argument is valid. On the other hand, so premise, actually let me clean this up a little bit. Premise 1, premise 2, conclusion, premise 1, premise 2, conclusion. Same thing in terms of the determination of values. Except this time we're negating the Q rather than the P. So we just put the simple sentence values for P. The reference values go directly under P. Is there a row on which the conclusion is false? Yeah, there are 2 rows. And hello, the argument fails. So the argument is invalid. It fails on row 1. It doesn't fail on row 3, but so what? The moment you have a row where the premises are true and the conclusion is false, the argument is invalid. Okay. So mess about with this stuff this weekend. Practice. If you go through the practice in the text, there should be more. I've got to double check what I have on our course site, but our course site should have additional practice. If it doesn't have additional practice, I'll make sure I put some up there. And this is where we'll pick up on Tuesday. Okay. In the meantime, have an awesome rest of your week. Be safe, be well, and let me know if you need anything, if there's anything I can do to help. I will. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.